So welcome everyone, and a warm thank you to the organizers of the GenAI Summit for driving such an important initiative for Greece and the wider region. We are here to talk about, briefly, what it actually takes to build and invest in companies in the GenAI era. AI, as you know, is everywhere now, in every product, every pitch deck, every industry, but that doesn't automatically translate into real value. In this discussion, we want to cut through the noise, understand where real differentiation comes from, and how founders, investors, and organizations can move from experimentation to genuine, scalable impact. My name is Dimitris Tryfon. I'm president at Winmedica, which is part of the Elpen Group, one of Europe's leading pharmaceutical manufacturers. I'm also a board member of the Athens Life Tech Park, which is the first privately funded biotech incubator and life sciences, private funded life sciences park in Greece. And also, I'm partner at T-Life Capital, a family office that invests in venture capital and private equity. I am a big AI enthusiast, both as an investor, as well as in implementing AI in the daily operations of my business. I'm very glad to be joined by the exceptional panel tonight, and I'll start with Michalis Stangos, partner at Elstone Capital, Lars Rasmussen, angel investor, co-founder of Panathina and co-founder of Google Maps as well. Ismini Papakirillou is the CEO of the Hellenic Development Bank. Ilia Tzortzopoulou, general manager of Wonderful in Greece, Cyprus, and Malta. And Alex Eleftheriadis, founding partner at BigPi Ventures. Guys, please, I'll give you 1 minute to introduce yourselves. We can start from Ismini.
Okay, thank you. It's great to be a speaker today among such distinguished speakers as well. I'm a part of the Hellenic Development Bank. It's the development institution in Greece supporting access to finance for SMEs. And for us, we really follow the country's development goals, and so digital transformation is a key one. So I'm looking forward to discussing more about it today.
Ilia?
Hello, thank you for the invite as well. It's great to be here. Ilia Tzortzopoulou, I'm general manager for Wonderful. At Wonderful, we're trying to support enterprises globally with a local scope and to actually support live into production their AI and organizational transformation through agentic solutions.
Great. Alex?
So Alex Eleftheriadis, I'm a founding partner of BigPi Ventures. We started in 2018 as one of the first early-stage investment firms here in Greece. We now grew to running 3 funds with 250 million assets under management. So one of the biggest tech investors in the region. But I did not start out in investments. So I studied electrical engineering in Greece. I went to Colombia to do a PhD, stayed there as a professor for 10 years, then started my own company, Video, in the video conferencing space, which was then acquired by a Canadian one called House, and then I switched to investments. So I wore I think pretty much all the hats, in the entrepreneurial journey, right? And in fact, I've seen several transformative technologies since then. Okay, so this is not the first time I'm experiencing, something like we're doing now with AI.
Great. Mike?
And I'm actually an active entrepreneur, an angel, an LP, and a first-time GP. In this journey, I think GP is the hardest job I've done. Elstone Capital is a seed Series A fund, mainly with a sweet spot industry-agnostic digitalization megatrends, and with a sweet spot to 1 to 3 million tickets. So far, we've done 6 investments. And I'm very happy to be here to this discussion.
Thanks. Lars?
Thank you. Yes, so you probably can't tell, but I'm not actually Greek. But I am married to a Greek goddess. My daughter is a Greek goddess in training. I'm a wannabe Greek. I live in Greece. And a million years ago, I helped start Google Maps. I've worked for Google, I've worked for Facebook. I started angel investing. And now I'm helping Greece build Panathina, which I think has the potential to become the world's most impactful Innovation Festival. Next May, hope to see you all there. Also building a fund that's relevant to our discussion today called Florent, that'll focus on enterprise AI with European founders in particular.
Great. So the past 3 years, we've all experienced a very big hype around GenAI after our first usage of OpenAI and all the big LLM products. But now we need to actually see, how those are expectations and how these expectations materialize. So, what do you see as the biggest challenge when companies try to implement AI in a way that brings actual value, productivity-wise, and also return on investment? And I don't know, Mike, do you want to start?
Yes. This is not an easy journey. First of all, with GenAI, most of the startups switched to an AI model. And companies that were developing technology just put a .ai and made our job really difficult. And the challenge here is not how they implement it, but who's actually, because we see several decks every day, and who's actually building proprietary, data, and how someone can actually evaluate that. Now, how this transforms also to enterprise value is, again, a difficult equation, in the sense that it's a turning point that a lot of big corporations are also shifting fast. And the whole journey of how AI is implemented and actually what is the outcome it will bring still is not tangible. And the valuations are getting higher, which also makes much more difficult to invest and make value out of it.
Great. So, Lars, what are your take on the major challenges at the moment?
Yeah, it's a super good question. First of all, in my industry, so I'm a software engineer by training, and here I think probably not that surprising is the area probably that AI has penetrated the most and the fastest, right? So I don't program myself anymore, unfortunately, but all my friends that still program tell me that they have coding agents hanging out with them in their tool of choice. They're called IDs, making them 5 times more, 10 times more, I hear 20 times more productive. I mean, the impact has been profound, turning us all into superhumans. Now, I think in general, across the board, I find, even myself, both in my professional and personal life, the single most difficult thing is that things are happening so fast that you cannot keep up with what is the right thing even to implement, to start out with. And then I think the next challenge is that in most enterprises, the AI tools are not super well integrated yet into the existing workflow. So you find yourself doing your work here, and then you go to an AI and you ask, and you have to kind of get the work back there. But when I look at the startups that are coming to me as an investor, I think increasingly we'll start seeing AI showing up more like your human colleagues, right? They will show up in your email inbox, in your Slack, in your Teams, in whatever communications tool you use. You can manage their permissions, much like you would manage the permissions of a human employee. And of course, with all the right safeguards, it'll work like that. And I've also seen a lot of companies working on automated orchestration, like automated assignments of tasks to both individual human employees and AI agents. And not, by the way, many of the companies I've heard doing this, it's not just if an AI can do it, then the AI must do it. Because you have to make sure that the human workers in the company has enough knowledge of what's going on that they can properly supervise the agents.
Clear. Ismini?
Yes, I mean, I think given that we look at the whole market, not, let's say, startups or really technologically apt companies, we see a big challenge actually with implementation of AI, especially with SME companies. They're too small, so it's quite an expensive thing for them often. And also they cannot, for example, when you go for financing and we create financial instruments that go through the banking sector, they go to a bank. If they do this type of investment, they will be asked, okay, where's my collateral? And that is very difficult to do when you're talking about intangible aspects. So that is still a big challenge that we haven't solved, how we can really implement it quickly and also provide adequate financing for it at a large scale. So I think this is still a very big challenge, and we need to think about it, how we could do it and how we could facilitate that, because it's clearly essential to their competitiveness, especially if you go to smaller companies. They need this differentiating factor to really become more competitive, to succeed. And if you cannot implement it, then it becomes, I think, a big hurdle for them. So we are working on it. I mean, in a few weeks, we are going to Brussels because there is a new committee on intellectual property to see how we could use it as guarantee. So there is a big discussion in the EU, I think, because they realize there is such a problem, but we are still very early on. So at least the problem is clear, but we need to do more work to make sure that then the financing is available for these SMEs to implement AI.
Clear. Ilia?
So what I would like to share is what we see from the side of the enterprises, because we work for an enterprise solution. So in order for companies to see business value and their return on their investment, they need to have solutions that can actually go into production. And this is coming from a challenge from the startup world. Like, we're still, I think, we're in a mentality of creating companies or products that are still in this B2B SaaS approach that we just name them somehow with AI. And we need to change our mindset on how we think about the AI product, so the enterprises can really see them in production, and then they can see the implementation going forward, and then they can see the business results. So what we think is that we need more infrastructure or operational change to go through this AI transformation we're going right now, at least for the enterprise world, not for the SMEs, as you mentioned. But yeah, I think bottom line is that companies, they find it quite hard to assess also the vendors and the partners that are out there. We have a client in France who was telling us that his LinkedIn inbox, he receives more than 50 inbounds per day for different AI vendors. Of course, enterprises are confused. Of course, they don't know what to choose. And if they have to choose one vendor for one small thing in compliance, one for HR, one for automation, email, somewhere in back office, it's super, super complicated. So we think if we shift the mindset there and we get something that it's an infrastructure, companies can build on top of that whatever they need. It's where companies will feel more comfortable to actually build agents for the enterprises and then actually see them into production, so then they can see the measurable results through the implementation.
Thanks. Alex?
Yeah, I think we need to go back to first principles. So first of all, companies need to build products that customers like to use, they need them, okay? That's where I would start. So knowing extremely well your customers, I think, is extremely valuable, and that's where you should start. Now, what is happening now with AI is that, the same way we automated sort of mundane sort of physical labor, like for humans, now we're automating mundane intellectual labor, okay? And that's what the challenge is. So now, instead of having a tool, I have a process. I have, instead of having drop-down menus of buttons, I have a prompt. And instead of having an application, I have something which can actually replace somebody in the org chart, right? So that's a very different way of looking at how I procure, IT services or computing services, etc. And things are all adjusting to that right now, right? But I think, one of the factors which creates confusion is also, where do the fundamental technology providers draw the line between what is offered by Mistral and OpenAI and Google and what is offered by a startup, let's say, okay? That sort of line is moving right now. You heard today earlier by the Prime Minister that they're looking to embed Mistral in the justice systems. So what does that mean? That if I have a startup doing AI for legal, let's say, services in Greece, I'm dead, because now Mistral will offer it, let's say, as a pre-built. That's a very dangerous position to be in. So I think that creates confusion. But as I see it, more and more, there is an appreciation that, we need to rethink how we integrate this in our systems. And it seems more and more that you have to go to the org chart and find workloads that have limited sort of creative value and replace them. And I think that's where the early wins, even the long-term wins, probably going to be.
Okay, thanks. So Lars, I mean, most teams say AI helps, but few achieve real productivity because, as you briefly mentioned, tools often sit next to the workflow instead of inside it. So as a product builder yourself, how do founders design AI so it becomes unavoidable in everyday work on operations?
Yeah, so look, I mentioned a few of the things I've seen coming, and I think Ilia's work at Wonderful is a wonderful example. That I think in the beginning, verticals like that, my own vertical of software engineering, the vertical of customer support here, some company, some startup will build the right answer for this. And as an investor, by the way, those are the things we look at right now the most. Where is a vertical where someone can make a very lucrative, even explosively lucrative business really quickly right now by integrating base models into that area. So I've invested in companies that do, not customer support, but customer surveys. For example, of course, programming, cybersecurity, all of these different things. That's, I think, step number one. Step number two, as we approach AGI, assuming that is in fact real, and I operate on the assumption that it is when I'm an investor, that more and more human-like workers will show up in your normal tools, your inboxes, and so on. And then I cannot predict what the third stage is for that, but I can't wait to see it.
Okay. So Alex, in today's world, where is there still space for true deep tech and not just apps riding on top of the big LLM models?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think there is a perception that AI will be the solution for all humanity's problems and then we're essentially done. And you know what, it's just you have to wait maybe a year or two for AGI to arrive and then it's finished. Now, I think this is obviously false. Of course, people have an incentive to keep promulgating the idea because when you're fundraising for billions of dollars, you need to say that, you know, I'm going for a very lofty goal, right? It's very hard to fundraise when your expectations are much lower. But in reality, you know, if you look at the LLM models today, you know, it's essentially predictive models. I use a series of numbers to predict another series of numbers, tokens or tokens, right? The world is much more complicated than that, okay? And it's not just textual. So the world is physical, it's 3D. There was a very interesting calculation done by Yann LeCun. LeCun is still the chief AI officer for Meta. He's leaving now to do his own startup. But one of the things he said is, first of all, he doesn't believe that AGI will come through LLMs. I happen to agree to that statement. But he did a very interesting back-of-the-envelope calculation. He said that if you compute the amount of quote-unquote tokens, right, that go through a person's eyes, right, and he did some assumptions about the amount of information you have to actually see. So he calculated that a human sees the set of tokens that has been used to train, I think it was GPT-4 or 3, I forget which one of the two, but a human will see the same amount of tokens by age 4. Okay, so the 4-year-old child will have seen the similar amount of information. So that should tell you how far we are from claiming that we sort of figure out how we think, how we create, how we innovate. It's a long way. And for those who are close to the physical aspects of the brain's function, I think everybody will agree this is like we're nowhere close to understanding how this thing works in 20 watts, by the way, okay? So the reality is that we created a fantastic tool. It's a great tool. In fact, you don't need AGI to declare success. Already it's a very powerful tool, okay? But I think you still need creativity. You still need other sort of solutions, you know, automated or you know, just created by people to complement that capability to deliver products. And I can go on and on about, you know, chip design, whatever, you know, et cetera, okay? So all that creative aspect that comes from the human intellect is still needed. It's going to be a very, very long time, but if we can sort of, you know, retire as a...
Clear. Ismini, so many companies, especially Greek SMEs, struggle to access and organize their own internal data. Do you believe that public funding should also help businesses modernize their data infrastructure instead of just supporting the AI layer on top?
Yes, totally. And I think that goes back to that we need to look at the whole market. And clearly there is a two-tier market at the moment. There are some companies that are very I mean, they're already adopting AI in their processes, everything. And then you have a lot of companies, SMEs in particular, which haven't even done their digital transformation. So you cannot talk about AI and really implementing in the functions of your company where you don't even have basic digital tools to use, you don't collect your client data. We see big gaps in the market. And so we think that we should be supporting this type of process, this type of transformation. And we have financial instruments that can help SMEs to really do this digital transformation. And we think it's key for their competitiveness and really to make sure that they are at a level that it's competitive. I mean, they can really keep their market share and even grow it. And for us, it's one of the biggest challenges we face because apart from the financing, we see a big gap also in education, and that is key. And you see also a generational gap, of course, that you have a lot of companies in Greece with older founders, and for them it's even bigger a challenge to really adapt this type of measures, to see the value for them, and to really make the investment to really implement it within their functions. So I think there is a lot of work to be done, but we fully support that. All of our instruments allow for investments in digital infrastructure, even in training, in the hiring of specialized personnel. But we wish we could see it moving faster. I mean, still there is a lot of hurdles in the market, and I think it's very important for the whole market to really work and make sure that this part of the market also comes to the right level, because otherwise the gap will just widen as technology develops faster and faster. So for us, this is a big concern, but we do have the financial instruments to address it.
Great. So Ilia leading a wonderful across Greece, Cyprus, and Malta, and working with enterprises in over 15 countries. What is the biggest challenge organizations face when trying to move from isolated AI pilots to AI at enterprise scale, basically?
Yeah, so what we have seen now with AI is that we all have used AI to help ourselves, like do our tasks faster, like enable our personal workflows or at work. But now we're in the transition with AI agents to actually give them tasks. Like they can be an extension of our team. They can target things we didn't have time to do. So we can see them take actions. They can integrate into the systems, read things, make decisions. They can be 24/7, they don't need to sleep. So we see this transition, and we see there is a challenge in letting it go and actually trusting that AI agents can actually do that task. So on one hand, in our view, it's that there is a cultural shift we need to go through. We need to see more examples. We need to see more success stories with agentic solutions. Regulations usually do not really help, but things are running very fast, and we're trying to keep up, all of us, and companies should do the same. So I think if we have an umbrella of really strong agents that can go into production and have proven that they can take these tasks and actually act fast and with quality, we can start trusting the products while being very, of course, compliant in the local ecosystem.
Clear. So, Michalis, AI adoption in Greece is rising, but we still have a long way to go. So, what systemic or cultural barriers must we overcome to move from pilots to dependable everyday use?
Yeah, I'm not sure how we measure that is rising. I've seen the similar surveys from the Big Four and how we measure this transition. And of course, there are some obvious obstacles like the skill gap that we need to empower people to this transition. And also there is a compliance, but it's not only Greek. The issue of legislation is mainly a European issue that we need to tackle if we want to, barrier the innovation lag that we have right now with mainly US and China. But also is a cost gap. There also HDB and other governmental instruments could support this cost gap for the transition of these SMEs and companies in Greece. And the deeper, I believe, it's the mindset gap that we need to work on. But I don't believe it's Greece the issue. I believe that the big bet here is how we empower Europe and how we prove that Europe can follow this wagon. Because if you see beyond the theory, the actual data that 70% of global patents in AI is owned by China. EU has only 3%. Less than 40% of the European enterprises use AI instead of 58% of the US SME companies. 70% of the European market actually is controlled by the cloud market is controlled by 3 US companies. So the big bet here for Europe is how actually moves from a more conservative, legislative role to a more agile and aggressive one. And we are lucky in that respect that our Prime Minister, the last 3 months, has already, he's aware and he's close to the ecosystem. I don't know if that translates to actual policy and to actual steps, but I haven't seen another European Prime Minister work talking in the last 3 months with Sam Altmans and then with DeepMind Chris Hasabi and today with CEO of Mistral. So that could be a competitive advantage, but we have a lot work ahead of us and not the European institutional way of work. We need there also a change of mindset.
Clear. So as we might have also some founders in the audience, what are you guys most excited about in terms of investment at the moment? What companies do you look at? Lars?
Yeah, I mentioned a few of them already. So what, from the perspective of a founder, in the early stages of starting a company, you need to look at, well, either you build a new foundational model, like frontier model like Mistral did. That requires a lot of resources and skills, but I would love to see more companies like that emerge out of Europe. But other than that, pick the right vertical and build enough value on top of the base models that there's a sustainable business to be done. There are lots of examples of this. Lovable, for example, one of the fastest growing software companies in the history, hit 200 million in annual revenue in just 1 year by taking other companies' models and make it easy to write full-fledged apps by simply talking to an AI. Customer service is a great example. And there's probably thousands of areas like this where right now you could build an explosive business by building on top of AI models. Now, the pitfall is, of course, that you might get it wrong and you work on something for a year or so, and suddenly a new feature comes out in one of the base models that make all of your work obsolete. And so there's that fine art of trying to predict where are the base models going to go within the lifespan of your company. And as an investor, of course, we try to suss out whether you're in one category or the other. There's also the maybe more exciting but a little bit more difficult to define area of trying to figure out the big answers to your questions about how can enterprises adopt this more quickly across the board instead of just vertical at the time.
Thanks. Alex?
Yeah, look, what we see is what we like to see is founders who have experienced a specific, business, a specific market in depth, and so they can bring this sort of in-depth understanding in a re-engineered solution that uses AI. So Mistral, for example, uses forward deployment engineers, and so they engage them for use cases that make sense for Mistral as a company. As you can imagine, this is not Alex's sort of small business in Athens, whatever, right? These are like big use cases where they can use them to demonstrate the overall value of the Mistral sort of company, right? So you will not get them to work for you, right? So there is an opportunity for good companies, right, to come in and make this adaptation, if you wish, of the foundational work done by the big guys, right, but adapt it and adjust it to the needs of their industry. And I want to remember to sort of point out that even before AI, think of how applications were developed. Let's say you want to make an iOS app. What, you're going to write the code from scratch? No, you'll use foundation code from Apple, right, frameworks, right? And you write your own Objective-C or whatever code you like to write in, but all the core capability of the phone is there for you. Apple provides it to you, all right? Now, if you're a company, you might think, okay, should I write the code myself or not? Chances are you don't have the resources in-house to write Objective-C, so maybe you outsource that, right? So it's obvious that you'll go and buy a software solution for your case, right? With AI, there's a tendency to think, oh, wait a second, since I'm dabbling with ChatGPT, maybe I can write a quick prompt and maybe it will do the job for me. But it's easier than if you were to write code, Objective-C, but it still work. And usually companies are like, have very little available sort of, power to give to this software development. So there is a need for these specialists, companies that we can potentially invest in, that will take this foundational technology, adapt it, and make it available for hopefully a very broad sort of market.
Clear. Michael?
Look, in our, personally, I look a lot into founders. At this level, what makes the real difference? Because we've seen these companies pivot again and again and again in order to be relevant. And as technology shifts so fast, the founder plays a pivotal role. And for me, is one of the key aspects. Also, if you see it from a broader perspective, what is the problem it's solving and how impactful it is. For example, we invested in a company that is actually detecting water leakages in the networks and the pipeline systems, and sees in all over the world the pipeline systems are 100+ years old, except maybe from UAE that it's building constantly now. If you can go vertically and give such kind of solution, then independently of any other issue, you're doing a very, very crucial problem. So it's not one size fits all. It's a multi-parametrical case that every time we look, and especially at this stage that we are investing.
Great. Ismini, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I mean, I will slightly change the question because we don't invest directly in the market, but I could kind of give some examples of what really excites us over the next few months that we think is really significant in what we do. And the implementation of AI in our process is something that is already happening. For example, in our customer service already we are in the process of implementing a tool that will make us instantly, much, much faster getting back to companies, providing feedback, which is key because that means we can increase the number of companies that we supply information. We also have one of actually our least, let's say, technologically strong sectors, which is microfinance. We have since the beginning of the year a fully digital tool, which is based on certain aspects of it in AI processes. So we really see there that decisions can be made very quickly and much easier than having the entrepreneur go to the bank, go to the multiple times, have envelopes full of papers and all that. We see that this is becoming a thing of the past. So for us, this is extremely exciting. And we see it also in more complex parts of the application process, and especially of the selection process, that we can really implement these tools and actually make our work more efficient, more secure, with better results. And we really look forward to seeing that develop over the next few months. Thank you.
Great. So Ilia, I know that you're not an investor, so I need to ask you something different. So basically, I want to ask all of you the last question for tonight. And Ilia, you can start. What's the single biggest opportunity for Greece in the GenAI era? What do you think?
So what I like about what is happening with AI globally is that I think in Greece, like, enterprises used to wait quite long enough until we get this amazing new software tools from the US, the Silicon Valley startups, until they come to our country, to our language, to our culture. But I think, and I see now that the Greek enterprises can actually get access to these amazing technology tools in their language, in the local frameworks and regulations, like today, like when the best model is released, they can have it right away. So I can see Greek enterprises the moment they are ready and they're taking the leap of faith into implementing and bringing into production agentic solutions that they can play at a global level, yeah, and compete with companies from US to Asia to all over the world.
Alex?
Look, I think we're doing very well in terms of education. We have great people, especially in AI, by the way. At good universities, there is investment in venture capital. But what dawned on me is the following, that, as a country that has been very slow in adopting technology, I think we were able to leapfrog others. So, when we created GovGR, right, we created a system that was, ages ahead of the United States. So when COVID hit, things here were like fully automated. In the US, they were doing, paper and stamps and whatever. So it seems to me that we are on a very good trajectory in terms of adoption. And right now, for those who live in Greece, I think you will all agree that the biggest problem is the state. Okay? It's a very bureaucratic organization. But guess what? With AI, and I guess Mitsotakis was on the spot saying, they're going to bring it into the legal system. So with AI, all this bureaucratic layer, right, can be automated. So my hope and expectation is that the biggest impediment for progress in Greece, which is the government, finally might be sort of eradicated. So fingers crossed, because I think for all the rest, we are fighting and we have, we're doing good progress. But on that issue, it's not something that each one of us can do alone, and maybe technology will come to the rescue.
Clear. Michael?
Again, is a difficult answer. First of all, it's interesting to see that from 2006 to now, a semiconductor ecosystem has grown in Greece. From 6 companies, we went to 80 companies, employee with 3,000 employees, and this is growing. It's not a huge ecosystem. It's valued around 500 million, but still is there and it's growing and it's important. Secondly, I believe the opportunity for Greece, especially as we have talent, is how we can work on the commercialization reactor of the institute, of the research institute that we have. Because we score number 3 in Horizon project among the whole Europe, but how many of these projects, and real project with value, transform actually to ideas that can produce value for the ecosystem? There lies a big opportunity, I believe.
Clear. Ismini?
I think, complementing what everyone else said, I think we have a great, technology gives you a great advantage. I think in other sectors, Greece is a small market, geographically there is constraints, but with technology you can really develop and, it's a level playing field. Wherever you are, you can do it. And I think that really gives an opportunity for Greece. We have a strong human capital, especially in the areas of technology. So I'm really looking forward to seeing champions develop, not just in the local market, but actually expanding abroad.
Perfect. And finally, Lars?
Yes, so look from the perspective of startups. This is not particular to Greece. It's maybe more particular to a small country with a relatively young ecosystem of startups. But there has never been a better time to start building. It's like the entire world has been uprooted and everything has to be rebuilt again. And it's easier than ever for a small team in a small country to build worldwide, globally disruptive businesses than ever before. And even just if Laura was saying this from OpenAI upstairs, right? Even just the fact that now you can address, you can build a product that speaks all the languages in the world, right? So it used to be a drawback that there's a relatively small number of people in the world that speaks Greek, but that has almost entirely vaporized now. And in fact, as an investor, I used to be an entrepreneur, I used to be a software engineer, then I became a manager, then I became an investor. I've never felt a stronger draw to get back into building something. So if you have good ideas, give me a call. I'll join your team.
Great. This brings us to the end of the discussion. Thank you, everyone, for your insights. And thanks for participating and being here, guys.
And a big congrats to Yorgos Nikolatakis and the team for organizing such a successful summit.